Hi, everyone. I'm Jack. I'm a fourth year grad student now at University of California, Irvine, where I study exoplanets. Um, but I just want to share a little of my story about how I got to where I am now. Because I think there's some, it was not a straight path by any means, and there's some twists and turns, and I think it's important that people know that there's not one path to grad school. There's many paths, many successful paths. And it's important to keep that in mind because um, the path you might think you have in your head, maybe won't work out, or maybe it will, but it's not right at that time. And so, just knowing that there's many paths to grad school, I think is important. So I'll start my story with in undergrad. I attended Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and I really loved the school. But I took my first astronomy class there and I was instantly hooked. I knew I wanted to do astronomy after taking this one course my first semester freshman year. But as I looked more into the astronomy program at the school, the more I looked, the more I kind of thought they don't really have a very strong program in astronomy. And in fact, I had taken half of the classes already that they had offered by the end of my freshman year. And they weren't really doing research. There was not a professor doing active research. And so that was really tough to come to grips with because I knew I wanted to do this, but it just felt like I wasn't quite in the right place to do this and to have opportunities to excel at it. And so I made a very tough decision to apply for transfer. And I was fortunate to get in to a couple schools on transfer, and I ended up choosing to go to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And at Vanderbilt, I ended up taking more classes, getting more into astronomy, loving it more. And I asked a professor there if I could do research with him, and he said yes. And he really like gave me the opportunity and the skills and the mentorship to excel in this field. And so I'm very grateful to him for giving me that opportunity and taking me under his wing in some sense, and allowing me to do this kind of undergrad research, but also to do it at a pace that was reasonable, acceptable for an undergrad. He didn't push me to put out papers and you should be doing this all the time. No, he knew I was an undergrad and that I had other courses and that research was something I was wanted to do on the side, but it was important to me, but not. It wasn't getting a grade in it. And he knew I wanted to, enjoy my undergrad experience as well, extracurriculars, hanging with friends. So he knew I was an undergrad, and I think that was very important. And I think that if you are in undergrad and thinking about doing undergrad research, I think you definitely should reach out to a professor or two in your school, but know that it shouldn't take over your life. You only get to go to undergrad once, and there's a lot of ways to enjoy that experience while also taking on, the kind of research that maybe you think you'd be interested in doing more one day and learning about. But I remember at the beginning of my senior year, he called me in his office and he asked me if I wanted to go to grad school and if so, where I was thinking about going. And I honestly hadn't thought a lot about it at that point. I was not sure if I wanted to go to grad school. I thought I might want to try something else. And I told him that. I said, I think I want to see what else is out there in the world. I've been a student my whole life from kindergarten up through senior year of college. And I wanted to see what it was like to go out and get a job and work and just kind of learn to see what that aspect of life was like. So he was very accepting of this and supportive. He did tell me, though, and I'll never forget, he did tell me, he said, I've heard a lot of people say that they will go out and get a job and then come back to school later in a few years. He said, I've heard that a lot. And he says, I've never seen anyone do it. And he said, even people with really good intentions, he said, I've never seen them actually come back to school. And that definitely was disappointing to hear because I did think that one day I would want to go back to grad school. And I was sincere about that. I wasn't just kind of telling him what I thought he wanted to hear. But I took that to heart and I said, okay, well, if this is something I want to do later, I'll have to be really intentional about it. And But he said, of course, it was the beginning of my senior year. He still wanted me in his lab for my senior year. He still wanted me part of his research team, and so I continued. And then when I graduated, I did take a job in the private sector. I worked as a software engineer for a bank, doing software and data engineering for them. And it took me about, I'll say, a year or so of doing this to realize that I really didn't like it. In fact, I really hated it. And right around that first year, I started thinking, okay, it might be time to start exploring grad school again. And the thing about grad school, of course, and this is true for anyone, never mind whether you're coming from undergrad directly or if you're going out in the world and coming back, no matter what your life path is, there are certain deadlines to grad school. The application season is usually in December. And if you have to take standardized tests, which I'm glad that they're getting rid of standardized tests in grad school. But at the time, I still had to take standardized tests. So, those have certain dates and there's certain deadlines. So those were things I had to be aware of. And as I was working, I was trying to also get all these things in order and taking tests and writing essays. And so if you do think you want to go to school, you just have to be mindful of the deadlines that are associated with actually applying to school. You might say, oh, I don't want to go for another year, but that means you have to start the application process now. But so I did all that. I applied to school, and I actually quit my job partway through the application process, specifically so that I could focus on applying. And I did move back home with my parents while I did that, which I think was a great thing. I enjoyed it. But then I did get into one school. I applied to 10 schools. I got into one. And that's where I'm at now. I'm at UC Irvine, and I absolutely love it. And I remember I went back to that advisor when I was in that application process. And I said, I'm going to do this. Will you write me a letter of recommendation? He said, absolutely. He was on my team during that application season and rooting for me and advocating for me. And I think he was surprised to see me, as dedicated to it as I was, because again, he said he had never seen someone come back. But so the kind of the point of the story that I want to wrap it up and say that you do not have to go from undergraduate to graduate directly. You can go out into the world, you can take a job, you can, anything you want to do. It can be 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. You can absolutely leave undergrad, go do other things, and come back to grad school or apply to grad school. And I just don't want you to think that your path closes because you don't go at a certain time. I know there are graduates in my program who are even older than me, who started after me and are older than me. So everyone has their own life story and path to grad school. There's no one right way to do it. One thing that I might say as a caution, just because I think the truth is important, coming back later after taking a few years off, it will make your first year a bit more difficult. I remember I had to kind of figure out again what it was like to be a student. And I did not do very well in my first classes that first quarter because I was out of practice. I mean, like anything in life, physics and astronomy and math is practice. The more you do it, the better you get at it, the better you understand it. And so having stepped away from it for a bit, I was a little rusty. And so it did take a bit of extra effort to kind of get back to the level that I think my peers were at who did come from undergrad to grad school. So I think that's important to say because it's the truth, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say about that. I just don't want you to think the door is closed.